Okay, thank you, Polly. Welcome everyone. My name is Kate Ritchie. I am module team chair of one of the SQE modules, which is W323 Business Law and Dispute Resolution. And I'm delighted that we're joined today by Andrew Poulton, who's a partner at Linklaters and specialises in commercial litigation and dispute resolution. His work spans class actions, complex big ticket disputes and sporting disputes. Warm welcome to you, Andrew. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks,
I'm going to begin. Thanks. I'm going to ask Andrew a few questions myself, and then, as Polly was saying, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions. And as she said, you can post those in the Q&A box. So Andrew, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your background. I know you qualified originally in Australia and practiced there, I believe, before
Yeah,
moving to the UK. So how did that happen, and how difficult has the transition been, or if at all?
yeah, no problems. Look, so I suppose I finished high school in 2004 and went to university. I didn't actually study law originally. I studied an arts degree, and I decided partway through that I would transition to a law degree. So I did that, and I finished my law degree in 2010. And that was obviously all in Australia. But obviously, given the overlap, it being a Commonwealth country, the legal systems are very similar. It's a common law system, with the rule of law and the usual constitutional framework. Although there are some differences. So that was my university career. Then when I finished university, I decided to apply to go and work for a judge. So I worked as a judicial assistant for 2 years, working with the judge, and that was very interesting. Got to see lots of in-court activity, so criminal cases, civil cases, so disputes about money, and planning and environment cases, so cases about planning permissions and things like that. So very, very broad. I did that for a couple of years. And at that time, I was debating whether I wanted to be a barrister, or whether I wanted to be a solicitor. And I decided that I would spend some time as a solicitor, possibly with a view to going to the bar and being a barrister in the future. So I moved into private practice in Australia, and I practiced in Australia for about 4 years in commercial litigation. So doing all sorts of disputes, corporate disputes, transactional disputes, some banking and finance work, and particularly in the corporate context. So that was my sort of Australian, work experience and sort of route into the law. When I was getting close to 30, I really had a long-standing desire to come to the UK, and I wanted to just work and live over here for a while, before I sort of got too old in life. And at the time, you had to have a visa prior to the age of 30 to do that if you're Australian. So I started applying for jobs, and I joined Linklaters here in London as an associate in 2016. And as we're coming up to 2026, September 2026 will be my 10th year in the UK. So what was meant to be a 2-year working holiday has turned into a more substantive, long-term life decision. And I'm a partner here at Linklaters. I've been a partner for 3 years now. And yeah, it's been a fantastic journey, and with a lot more road left to run.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So can you tell us a bit about the nature of the work that you do now? I referred to class actions in your introduction. I don't know if you can explain a bit about what those involve.
Yeah, of course. So I would say that about 50% of the work I do is class actions. About 25% is sporting disputes. and then about 25% is private, what I call big ticket disputes. But maybe I'll touch on all of them. But the class actions one is particularly important because people, when by class actions I mean large scale consumer redress. So people at the moment may be aware about motor finance commissions. There is a very large FCA-led redress program that's going on. People that bought cars that were missold, financial products. Some other historical examples of that are PPI, payment protection insurance. So class actions are about very significant groups of individuals, and by that I mean in the hundreds and most likely thousands, teaming up together with the benefit of a claimant side law firm and a litigation funder who will pay the costs and expenses of the litigation on behalf of those individuals so that they can seek redress compensation for wrongs that have been done to them by big business, basically. And it's a really interesting area of law because it's growing significantly. People probably aware that in the US, there's quite a big class actions litigation world. In the UK, it's not as prominent. Most of the litigation that occurs in the UK class action litigation is in relation to competition litigation infringements. So the companies that tend to be sued at the moment are the large tech companies like Apple and Facebook and the like, over iPhone battery length, things like that. But there are other types of class actions. There are data breach class actions. People have probably heard about, getting their personal information compromised in a cyber incident where a computer hacker breaks in. So they're a fertile source of class action work. And otherwise, on the stock markets, there are class actions that are brought by shareholders against companies when their share price dips, because the company has done something wrong and the shareholders lose money. So the shareholders will sometimes bring a claim alleging that they've suffered loss because of the company's actions. So that's the class actions piece. The sports piece is predominantly in the football world. I tend to act for the football regulators in the UK. So that's the Premier League and the Football Association, and that's against football clubs. Probably read about some of the cases in the media. The Chelsea case was one recently that I was involved in. And so that's typically the enforcement of the competition rules against the club. And when the club has broken the rules, the regulator needs to take action. So I also do a bit of work in rugby union, a bit of work in rugby league. So fairly broad practice. And then the final type of work I do is what I call big ticket commercial disputes, and they are big businesses that enter into contracts with each other, and sometimes those contracts don't work out the way everyone would have hoped, and often there will be a dispute between the parties about what they were required to do or what they were required to provide, and another party will often say that they have suffered some loss or damage, and there'll be a big claim about that. So they're the main areas that I work in, Kate.
Great, thank you. That's really fascinating. There's a range of work there. And we encourage our students to recognise the importance of teamwork, and we offer them opportunities to engage in projects where they work with each other. How important is teamwork in your context? Do you frequently work with others?
Absolutely. Like to say that teamwork is a core part of the job is a sort of understatement. I think it's an essential part of the job. The size of the disputes and the litigation that we work on at Linklaters, they are such that it's not possible for one person alone to act in these matters. It's not uncommon to have a team of somewhere between 5 to 20 associates working on a case at any given time. And that's because if you're being sued by 5,000 claimants in one go, there's a lot of things that need to be done on the defendant side, and that requires a lot of human power, but also increasingly technological power, and we can talk maybe a bit about that later. But having everyone in a room and working together is vital, and everyone will often be working on different pieces of what we call work streams. So some people might be working on the damages element, some people might be working on the liability element, some people might be working on collecting the evidence, some people might be working with the experts. And it's not uncommon to sort of have daily meetings with the team where we go through the actions, and we communicate with each other, and we explain what we're doing and what progress and what hurdles we're finding, and if we're on track or if we're slipping. So teamwork is a huge part of that, and that requires real leadership at the top, but it also requires teamwork skills amongst the members of the team.
Thank you. Yes, and well, at the end of a project as well, do you have a time for debriefing and reflection to sort of see what lessons can be learned as well? Because that's something else we
Definitely.
try and encourage our students to do.
Yes, we do. We have a lessons learned meeting, because sometimes the cases that you work on run for anywhere between 3 and 6 years, sometimes longer. And during that time, a huge amount of knowledge is gained that could be redeployed for the benefit of others in the future. And so it is common, not just at the end of the matter, but certainly at intervals as well, to stop and pause and ask ourselves, how is it going? What's working well? What isn't working well? What's our communication medium? How are we communicating with each other? Is there a better way to do it? Are people getting sufficient breaks? All those things that there's definitely a check-in point regularly throughout the life of our matters. And that's all to ensure that we're working well as a team.
Thank you. Actually, you said we get in a room together. Is that is that remotely, or is that do you try and still work in an office, physical office as well?
Yeah, so it's I'd say if you asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I'd say I would have said a hybrid. We're interestingly increasingly moving back into the office, because I think for junior lawyers in particular, there's a lot that can be learned from just being in the office and observing people working in their trade. But equally, there is still a lot of remote working that goes on as well. And it was interesting throughout the pandemic and in the time that's followed. Had to work very hard to work on teamwork and teamwork skills in an online context as well as in the office, because it can be that little bit more hard, more difficult to sort of engage when everyone's not physically in the room. You can't just pop around the corner. But no, I'd say there's still a fair balance. Some people will join a meeting via Teams because they're working from home. Others will be in the room. I'd say that the trend in the legal profession at the moment is moving back towards more time in the office, but with a recognition that flexible working is good for everyone, and most employers are very good about that as well.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, and as you say, it's even changing sort of as time goes on, that perhaps more people are going back into the office. But you mentioned technology and the influence of technology. I guess that we could have a whole session on this, but how has AI impacted? How do you see it impacting, particularly on the area of dispute resolution?
So it's been a really interesting, I would say, just 6 months. The AI phenomenon and the development of products like ChatGPT and the like that became mainstream 12, 18 months ago. It's probably taken 12 months from that point for them to flow into the legal world. And what we are seeing in the legal world is now specific AI tools being developed to assist lawyers with their jobs. So we use some platforms here at Linklaters We use a product called Legora, which is a specific AI tool developed to assist lawyers. There is other products in the market that you've probably heard about, like Harvey and others. So we have those tools. We also have a sort of in-house chatbot, so it's not connected to the internet. But we can use that to quickly review large amounts of information. And I would say that the trend towards using that is increasing. Although, my view is I don't see it entirely replacing the industry. I think what will become more important is people's ability to use AI effectively, not as a replacement for their job, but as an efficiency tool. And in order to do that, I still think there's a place for learning the sort of traditional lay of the land and the traditional ways of working, because in order to know whether something's coming out of AI is good or bad, you kind of need to have that independent knowledge yourself. But it is moving very fast, and it's certainly a very topical issue at the moment.
And yes, and do you train new trainees? Do you give them some training on the expectations around use of AI and the ethical use and so on?
Absolutely. And sometimes I joke that it's the trainees training the older people because they have a better knowledge of the tech. But we have a very strict approach to the use of AI. We have lots of policies around what can go into it and what comes out of it. Some clients don't want to use it. Some clients don't want their information in it. Some are comfortable with it. Some want to know if they're using it. So there is a real mix. We're obviously very, very focused too on the output of the work product. There is no world in which work product is generated by AI and is used without being checked manually and carefully, because as everyone probably knows that they do have a potential to hallucinate, and in the US in particular, there's been some very, very high profile recent in the litigation context as well, recent examples of lawyers being subject to disciplinary findings and also adverse criticism by the courts because of AI generated documents that have contained incorrect citations. There was a very prominent case recently here in the UK about a practitioner working in the immigration tribunal, I think, in using AI, not using ChatGPT, which were connected to the internet, as opposed to a sort of on-premises solution, and the consequences of that from a privilege perspective. So the client privilege and whether that involved a disclosure of information to a third party. So very, very topical.
Yes, and breach of confidentiality as well, I think, because
Exactly.
all those concerns. Yes, and that's great. And just to go, you obviously have been attracted to working with sporting clients, with corporate clients. Do you think you need to have a certain type of personality that enjoys working with those sorts of clients?
Look, I think there's room for everyone, to be honest. When I look across the teams that we work with regularly, and when I say teams, there's often a client team as well. So there'll often be, I was on a call this morning with a client from Hong Kong, and there was 7 or 8 people on the call from the client side, and there were 4 or 5 people from our side, working as a team, and all different types of personalities, all different types of skill sets. You don't necessarily have to be the biggest, loudest person in the room. There's always room for, a quiet, diligent person. There's a room for a person who's measured in their thought. There's lots of different, personalities and types that can fit into a law firm and the team.
Oh, thank you. I think I'm just, I mean, I don't know if you can give us any sort of suggestions up to our students about any sort of how they might go about getting work placements, work experience, and what might help them stand out in terms of any application.
Sure. So I think having a very good knowledge of the pathways into the law firms is something that will always assist, and looking at that as early as possible in your career. Linklaters, along with other very large firms, operate the vacation scheme, um, programs. So students coming in for a couple of weeks over the summer or over the winter, those are advertised and very structured. There's an opportunity for everyone to apply, and a lot of firms do them, and I would encourage everyone to apply to as many firms as possible to enhance their prospects of doing that. In terms of the things that we tend to look for, it's not what people would often think. It's we are attracted to people who have diverse and different backgrounds. We're attracted to people that have prior working experience. We're attracted to people that might be looking at this as a career anew. So this might be their second or their third career. Having worked in any capacity, not just in the law, is always a good thing, because it shows resilience, it shows dedication, it shows teamwork. So having some form of previous work is very useful, and if you haven't had that, then being involved in university associations, or or something that you can demonstrate that teamwork is really important.
Thank you. Yes, it's a teamwork clearly is a valuable skill to demonstrate there. That's really helpful. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to stop asking questions myself at this point and throw it open to students in the room. Polly has invited you to pop questions in the Q&A there. Has anyone got any questions? Deathly silence. I think you've obviously given so much wonderful information, Andrew. You're stunned into silence.
Hi, I'm using the mic just because the Q&A thing doesn't seem to be working for me.
Okay, no, go ahead, Joanna.
How would you advise after you get your degree to get your foot in the door at a company like yours?
Look, I think it's understanding those pathways. So a lot of the pathways that we have run, they start even before you have a degree. So that whilst you're studying, as you are at the moment, we're often looking for people to come in before they finish their degree. If for whatever reason people haven't had an opportunity or time to do that, then different firms have different pathways. So some firms will look to take people at the more qualified, once they qualify and once they finish their degree. The most common pathway, though, is coming in before you finish your degree, through a training contract program, and then they're quite structured, those programs, and all the law firms have details on their websites about what the cutoff dates are and what the application processes look like.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Anik. What were the biggest challenges in transitioning from practicing in Australia to working at a firm like Linklaters? And what would you advise students who hope to build an international litigation career?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the big challenges that I found coming from Australia is that Australia's not a massively international jurisdiction. Most of the disputes work that tends to occur down there is domestic in nature. So it's large companies in Australia suing one another. And I think what you find is when you work in a large firm like Linklaters or many other firms, or any firm really in London, you're likely to come across a lot of international work. So you're likely to be dealing with parties in different countries. And so I suppose coming over here and retraining to become an English lawyer meant that I had to learn a lot. I had to learn a lot about jurisdiction, about choice of law, and the basis upon which an English court could deal with a dispute, for example, for a company that was located in Italy or France. I think also understanding, the European landscape. When I came over, we'd had the Brexit vote had occurred, but we hadn't had any implementation period. So I had to learn the European framework as well as learning what would happen after exit day. And so I suppose getting your head across European things like regulations that used to have direct effect in the jurisdiction, and understanding that was quite a steep learning curve.
Thank you, Andrew. A great question. Thank you, Anik. A question from Reese. Is Andrew still dual qualified? If so, how was the process of qualifying as a solicitor in England and Wales as a non-UK lawyer?
So it's changed recently, I think. And when I say recently, I think maybe in the last year or two. I am still dual qualified. I'm admitted to practice in Australia. I'm admitted to practice in England. It was quite a significant undertaking. It involved two sort of significant blocks of exams. First was a multiple choice exam. I think it was 350 questions. With about a minute at a question. So it was quite a long exam. And the second, once you pass the first phase, was a 5-day intensive where we had a lot of workshop-based learning and workshop-based examinations. It is a fairly significant undertaking, but it's achievable. And I think if you're studying like the way you are, then you'll be able to do it if you need to do it, obviously. But for a person to have a foreign legal qualification, I think you've just got to back yourself and recognize that there's going to be a lot of hard work and a lot of reading, but it's not something that you haven't done before.
Thanks, Andrew. Great. Any other questions from students in the room, either post in the Q&A or if you want to use your mic? Okay, I can't see in the moment. Just Andrew, if I may ask, I don't know whether the Mazur case impacted much on Linklaters. It may not have affected your business model too much, but I just wondered what your thoughts were.
Yeah, no, it did. It was an area of great scrutiny, and it was a case that caught the attention of every single law firm, I'd say, in the jurisdiction, big or small, because in a large team like we have paralegals who are not legally qualified. We have persons who are qualified overseas but not yet English qualified. We have persons who are training to become qualified because they've studied and done a SQE in this country, and then we have junior lawyers, and then we obviously have senior lawyers, and so the concept of conducting litigation and whether there were elements of that could only be done by certain people in the team caused a lot of that was quite a significant thing, and we had a lot of briefings about it. Had a lot of briefing notes, a lot of focus from our team, our risk team, about what we could and couldn't do. And obviously everyone followed the Court of Appeal's decision very closely as well.
Yes, and it was a bit of a relief, was it?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
It's interesting to know. Yeah, obviously, I was aware that smaller firms were impacted, but it's interesting to hear that it goes all the way kind of up. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how things develop now.
Exactly. And the other thing in terms of that's really interesting at the moment that your students might want to look at is, I mentioned earlier that the class actions area is a growth area. The Department for Business and Trade announced, I think, late last week, a consultation on the class actions regime in this country, and the potential expansion of it to include consumer claims. And I think that whether that happens within the term of this government or not, I think that is the direction of travel. And I think that if that occurs, that will obviously, that as you could expect, there are firmly held views in the market about the pros and cons of it. On the consumer side, the consumer advocates see it as a very positive development. Big business probably doesn't see it necessarily as a welcome development. But what it does tell me is that in terms of growth areas in the disputes world, class actions is likely to be an area that continues to grow in scope. And I think firms will continue to invest in that area. That means more jobs. That means better qualification pathways for people like your students on the call now. So I think, reading up about that and being alive to the landscape and the developments in it is something that, is a sensible thing to do.
Great, thank you, Andrew. There's some more questions coming in. Another question from Anik. In your view, do UK law graduates have any advantages or disadvantages when seeking opportunities within the European legal market?
I think that that there are probably some advantages in the sense that London, England, the UK, the English legal system is a hugely well-respected legal system. I think it's offered certainty for a very, very long time, and you see that with commercial contracts regularly being governed by English law and commercial contracts regularly having as a place of jurisdiction the determination of disputes in England. So I do think there is a significant benefit to knowing the English legal system and having studied it, because it is, I think, above and beyond the first choice for almost all jurisdictions in the world that are engaging in commerce.
Oh, okay, thank you for that, and thank you for the question, Nick. Reese has asked, what attracted you to work at Linklaters over other firms? Was it what were you looking for?
I was very interested in working at a firm that worked with a lot of international work and a lot of international clients, and a firm that had a presence in many jurisdictions across the world. Because it is the case that I regularly work with my colleagues in my offices all around the world. Predominantly, I'm working with people in the US, Hong Kong, Singapore, sometimes in mainland Europe, and that's a really special thing to do because it feels like you're one team, even though you're not physically located in the same spot. So that was a big consideration for me.
Great, thank you. And I think there's another question from Anik as well. How are trainees supported in developing teamwork and collaboration skills in large multi-jurisdictional cases?
Yeah, well, there's quite a significant training program that the trainees go through in not just this firm, but most firms. There's usually a 2-year training contract where things like working across borders, working in large teams, those core skills are trained, and you'll get lots of on-the-job experience as well, practically. So you sort of aren't put in a team and expected to know how to operate. I think there's a fair learning curve, and you'll get opportunities to learn and be taught how to work in a big team, because there are sort of key things like reliability, clear communication. Those types of skills are really, really important.
And do you think those can be taught, or do you think that to some extent that those are sort of innate as well?
Some of them are, I think, innate. Like, I think things like attention to detail and whatnot, you could teach yourself to focus and be really careful about the detail. Things like communication skills, again, I think, you know, they are vital. You can get better at them. I think it helps to have a bit of a baseline standard. But yeah, look, I think it is the case that people get better working in a team as time goes on. So whilst there could be some hiccups at the start, I think they sort of tend to work themselves out.
So some perseverance is
Exactly.
key. Yeah. Great, Andrew. I'm just trying to say, I don't know if there are any more. I hope if I've missed any questions, do let me shout. I'm having a quick look in the Q&A. I think we've picked up on all of them. Any more? This is kind of final opportunity.
I haven't had any email to me, so I think you've caught all the ones I can see as well.
Cool. Thank you for the reassurance, Polly. Right. Well, unless there are any further questions, I think if you could just give Andrew some warm virtual applause. You can use your react button up at the top there. Oh, I can see some people clapping. Yeah.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you. And I think what's reassuring, Andrew, as well for our students is to know that, you know, all of life experience can be useful. You know, that you can draw on all those other backgrounds and experiences you had, and that they will be of value. So that's really reassuring. And thank you for all your insights and wisdom. It's been great to hear from you. Thanks so much.
No problems, and nice to speak to your students, and wish everyone all the best with their career. And it's an exciting career to work in. It's very rewarding. It's very interesting. So enjoy your studies, and there's lots of different pathways out there.
Thank you. And actually, it's good to hear. It's good to hear as well. Yeah, that you actually enjoy what you do, because we know it's hard work.
Yeah.
But it's great to hear that it is rewarding. So thank you for that. Okay, Polly, I don't know if you want to just remind everyone what else is coming up this week, just in case. I don't know if.
Yes, absolutely. I'll put a little link in the Q&A box, but we still have 3 more days of Employability Week. So we've got exciting events happening every day and every evening. I'm going to pop the link in now. Everything is shared on the Study Home site. So hopefully that link will arrive in time for you to see it before you log off. I'm going to stop the recording now. But thank you very much, everyone. That was really interesting, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
No worries. Good to see you all.
Enjoy the rest of the week. And thanks so much, Andrew. Yeah.
Thank you.
Real pleasure to have you. Thank you.